formal meeting. We apologize that the council's running a little late.
Welcome to the formal meeting of the City Council. We're starting a few minutes behind. Thank you, everybody here. Thank you, Council Chair Dugan, who is joining us through WebEx. We're going to start. It's a very packed agenda, so this is my first time chairing the meeting, so bear with me. This is going to be a ride. Welcome to today's council meeting. We're happy to have you joining us today virtually and in person. Thank you for your patience as we continue navigating the COVID pandemic and trying to make the best decisions to keep people safe. If you're here joining us on site, the council continues to take precautions to reduce the transmission of COVID-19 and maintain healthy work environment. Disposable masks are available outside the meeting door. Raise your hand. One of our staff will bring you one. If you're here to give public comment, feel free to remove your mask after your name has been called out when you are at the microphone to address the council right there. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. So we're going to go to item number 3, which is welcome and public meeting rules. Welcome to everybody who's joining us tonight. If we are joining us for the public comment opportunities later on the agenda, we are accepting your comments in person and also through WebEx. And for those whose only option is to call in, staff will be monitoring a separate phone line. Before we begin moving through the agenda, I want to mention and review our rules of decorum. Those are guidelines that the City Council has always had in place to help our meeting progress in orderly, civil, and efficient way so that everyone has the opportunity to voice their opinions without feeling intimidated. In order to achieve this, our rules of decorum begin from the moment you arrive in our meeting. We respect all points of views and we welcome all new insights. While giving your comments, please be respectful, avoid yelling, profanity, or making racial slurs, obscene or defamatory remarks. If you violate this rule, your line will be muted or you will be asked to stop. If you feel you need to use profanity or disrespectful remarks to express your point, you are welcome to email our council members or call our comment line to leave a message. In addition, our staff will request your name during the WebEx registration progress. To limit disruption, your name cannot include a message or violate our rules of decorum. If your name doesn't meet those requirements, then our staff will make contact with you to gather that information. For those joining us on WebEx, please monitor your chat in case we try to reach you. Scott Corpany from our staff is helping to moderate the WebEx portion of our meeting. I will be messaging with the attendees to coordinate on any questions from your registration. The staff is handling a number of tasks. Please limit messages to technical issues and minimal changes to your registration. If you would like to send any comment, feel free to mail it to P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or email us to council.comments@slcgov.com. You can also call us 801-535-7654. That brings us to item A4 of our agenda, and the council will consider adopting a joint ceremonial resolution with Mayor Mendenhall declaring their commitment with Salt Lake County and Olympic venue committees to host Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. I would like to turn the time over to Councilmember Chris Warren to read the resolution.
Thank you. This is a resolution declaring our commitment with Salt Lake County and Olympic venue communities to host future Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. Whereas Salt Lake County successfully hosted the 2002 Olympic Winter Games and Paralympic Winter Games and the communities of Salt Lake City, Kearns Metro Township, and West Valley City were critical to this success. And whereas facilities put in service for the games continue to be utilized to this day, including the Salt Lake Sports Complex in Salt Lake City, the Utah Olympic Oval in Kearns, Maverick Center in West Valley City, and many more. And whereas we are working in partnership with Salt Lake City, Utah Committee for the Games, or SLC-UTCG, in developing beneficial operating principles for the games in Utah's communities, and whereas we look to ensure that the next games hosted in our communities prioritizes diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, is climate positive and net zero waste, and acts as a catalyst for achieving major community initiatives, and Whereas we believe such a vision will be accomplished in a multitude of ways, including ensuring everyone employed to help prepare for the games or employed during the games will be paid a living wage, ensuring the games are welcoming, inclusive, and accessible for all, with universally accessible venues and events and disability awareness training for public-facing staff and volunteers, and that opportunities should be created for residents of all income levels to participate in the games and accompanying events. Prioritizing the use of existing infrastructure and venues, developing a carbon management plan for games-related activities, striving for a games that is net zero waste, and forming a sustainability committee to ensure sustainable goals are achieved for the games. Maximizing the use of public transportation, including clean and active transportation modes for all game stakeholders. Ensuring the SLC UTCG will be a model of transparency, robustly engaging the public in the planning process, making regular meetings open to the public, and sharing information. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Salt Lake City Council and Mayor of Salt Lake City, joint officials in Salt Lake County, Kearns Metro Township, and West Valley, looking forward with great anticipation to being selected as the host city for future Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. Be it further resolved that Salt Lake City shares the commitment of Salt Lake County, Kearns Metro Township, and West Valley officials in working with our community partners and the SLC UTCG to create a games that strives for diversity, equity, and inclusion in all games activities, delivers a net zero waste and climate positive games, and acts as a catalyst for achieving major community initiatives. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve this resolution, joint resolution.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the table by Chris Warren and a second by Councilmember Fowler. I'm gonna, is there any discussion on this item? Okay, I'm gonna call the question. Councilmember Peter Eschler,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros,
Yes.
Councilmember Chris Warren,
Yes.
Mano,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. This motion passes unanimously. We have here joining us through WebEx Fraser Bullock, President and CEO of the Salt Lake City, Utah Committee for the Games. Welcome. Would you like to speak to the resolution?
Yes. Thank you so much. Our partnership in 2002 was extraordinary. Salt Lake City and all of the venue communities were really the heart of the games. The volunteers you provided, the welcome to the world was so special. I still have all those wonderful memories. We look forward to partnering with you again to create even a higher level of welcoming, diversity, inclusion, and environmental goals. We have so many things that we would like to accomplish with you together, but at the heart of it, it is our citizens and their ability to welcome the world like no other community. So we're very, very appreciative of your support. We will be transparent. We will be a great partner to you, and we are so appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just very quickly, I have known dozens and dozens of people in the state of Utah that ended up living here in the state because of the Olympics. So I think this will be an amazing thing. So let's make it happen. I also would like, before we move to item B on the public hearings, I would like to recognize Jim Bradley, Salt Lake County Council Member at Large, here in the audience. So we are moving to item number B, public hearings. Now we will begin the public hearing portion of the agenda. Taylor Hill and our staff will be calling the names of those who wish to comment. We will call the names of people joining on WebEx and in person, based on the order of the registration or when we receive the comment cards. Once we open the public comment, Taylor will announce those 3 names at a time so people can have some notice and be prepared to speak. When it's your turn to speak, Taylor will announce your name. For people in WebEx, she will unmute your line and you may begin. For people in person, please step up to the podium to make your comment into the microphone. Once you begin, please state your name and the 2-minute timer will start. At the 2-minute mark, staff will announce time. If you are unable to finish your comment, please send the rest of the comment via email, mail, or call our office. Our contact information is posted in the meeting room or in the WebEx chat. If you do not wish to speak, please either message our staff or when staff states your name, please let us know you're just here to listen. Our first public hearing is item B1 and is regarding an ordinance, rezone and master plan amendment at Rose Park Lane. Before we begin taking comments, I will turn the time over to Brian Fulner, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give us a short introduction of this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal from City Public Lands to rezone the city-owned parcels at 1902, 1932, 1944, and 1954 North Rose Park Lane from R1 7000 rather, which is residential, to open space. The Rose Park Small Area Plan Future Land Use Map would also be amended under this proposal. The original intent was to construct an indoor recreation facility. However, the administration more recently stated they will do significant public outreach to determine a use if the zoning map and master plan amendments are approved by the council. No specific proposal for the site has been submitted to date. That is my introduction.
Thank you, Brian. Taylor, please start our first public comment.
Thank you, Council Chair. It looks like there are two people here to speak to this item. The first will be Dorothy Owen, followed by Rhonda Gill Devereaux. Dorothy is in person to speak.
I would ask that Rhonda Devereaux. Oh my goodness. So my name is Dorothy Owen, and I am Chair of the West Point Community Council. And 2 years ago, we met with the city and held a public meeting on this particular piece of property. I submitted written comments to you, so I don't have to go over all of that. I think the most important thing is that you need to know that in this community, about 30% of the families that are impacted by this are Hispanic, and while they understand all the issues and everything else, it's a little bit more difficult for them to come here tonight. All the people that I've met with on these things are very concerned about the traffic concerns that exist with the regional athletic complex, and are concerned that whatever is there, whether it's an indoor soccer facility or not, that it'll just exacerbate problems rather than resolve the existing problems first and then consider what to do next. And that's their major concern. They're also concerned about the fact that we have this beautiful regional athletic facility there, and it's not available to any of the local youth. So when we talk about the Olympics and we want inclusion and equity and that, we need to start with our local neighborhoods. To play soccer or any of the sports there at that facility, you need to belong to a league. And we've talked with parents who have children in the league, and a league will cost about $2,000 a year. And that's why there aren't any local children using it. So the neighborhood's feeling is that we need to really look at using this property in a manner so that the community benefits from it and that the community has a say in it. And while the administration is saying that they'd like to do it, we would like to see it in writing because we thought this was going to happen 2 years ago.
Thank you, Dorothy.
So thank you.
Next, we will hear from Rhonda Gill Devereaux, who is also in person.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Devereaux. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the West Point community because I own a farm at the end of Rose Park Lane, Happy Horse Ranch. I also presented at the Planning Commission meeting, and I just wanted to say that the vote to push this forward was tied, so it's quite a contentious thing. I did submit written comments. I hope you've had a chance to read those. I don't want to have to go over that again. It's just a short one page with some photos. There's only two reasons that we can think of that the property needs to be rezoned at this moment. And that is because the RAC would like to tear down the trailer home, which is a public nuisance. It's a neighborhood eyesore, and it is a horrible attraction for rodents and transients and spray painting artwork, if you will. And they can tear that down if it's open space and not remediate the land. And then if the land is open space, the open space sounds like a park or, you know, a lovely place where kids can play in the neighborhood. But what open space actually allows the RAC to do is to build taller, bigger, less offset, because the regulations for building a building are less restrictive than the home regulations where it's zoned right now. Because they don't have a plan in place, there's no need to rezone that piece of land right now. What does need to happen is that trailer home needs to be removed and the place cleaned up. I actually have 5 minutes because I'm speaking on behalf of West Point.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Rhonda. Thank you so much for your comment.
I submitted comments ahead of time, both to the staff.
Excuse me.
Wanda was going to take 5 minutes.
We don't have that rule. We only have 2 minutes for everyone so that it's equitable. It's different than the planning. Yeah.
Thank you then.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Dorothy.
That was our final comment for this item.
I'm looking for a motion.
I move the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Petro Eschler and a second by Councilmember Wharton. Is there any discussion on this item? Okay, I'm going to roll call. Councilmember Fowler,
Yes.
Councilmember Mano,
Yes.
Wharton,
Yes.
Valdemoros,
Yes.
Petro Eschler,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Motion passes. And our second public hearing, item B2, is regarding an ordinance zoning map amendment at 858 West and 860 West Hoyt Place. Before we begin taking comments, I will first turn the time over to Brian Fulmer again, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give us a short introduction of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This proposal is to rezone the properties you referenced previously on Hoyt Place from R15000 residential to SR3 special development pattern residential. Two homes under renovation are currently on the parcels, and the stated intent is to subdivide each parcel and construct 2 additional homes. That is my introduction.
Thank you, Brian. Taylor, please start with the first public comment.
Thank you, Council Chair. It looks like there is no one here to speak to this item.
Thank you. I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and defer action to a future council date.
Second.
I have a motion on the table by Councilmember Fowler and a second by Councilmember Mano. Is there any discussion? I'm going to roll call this. Councilmember Petro Eschler,
Yes.
Valdemoros,
Yes.
Wharton,
Yes.
Mano,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
I'm a yes. This motion passes. Our next public hearing is item B3 and is regarding an ordinance zoning map amendment at approximately 805 South, 800 West. Before we begin taking comments, Brian Fulmer, please give us a little introduction on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This proposal is to amend the zoning map for the property you referenced from M1, which is light manufacturing, to RMU 35, or residential mixed use, to potentially construct a multifamily or attached single-family development. That is my introduction.
Thank you, Brian. Taylor, please, the first comment.
Thanks, Council Chair. It looks like there's no one here for this item either.
I look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, move the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Mano and a second by Councilmember Fowler. I'm going to call the question. Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Mano.
Yes.
Wharton.
Yes.
Valdemorris.
Yes.
Peter Eschler.
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion passes. On our fourth public hearing, item B4 is regarding an ordinance rezone and master plan amendment at 2435 South, 500 East. Before we start taking comments, Brian Fulmer will give us another brief introduction on this item. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This proposal is to amend the zoning map for the property you referenced from R1 7000, which is residential, to RMF 35, or moderate density multifamily residential. Sugar House Master Plan future land use map would also be amended under the proposal. The petitioner's stated purpose for the requests is to construct for sale townhomes on the property, which is slightly less than 1 acre. No formal site plan has been submitted to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Taylor, please, our first commenter.
Council Chair, there are two people here to speak to this item. The first will be Judy Short, followed by George Chapman. Judy is in person to speak.
Thank you.
My favorite cage. I'm Judy Short, the land use chair for Sugar House. We like the fact we approved the rezone. We think that's a good idea. It's almost an acre of land. It will be 18 for sale townhomes. So that's a good thing.
Ms. Short? I'm sorry. Ms. Short, we just can't hear you in the microphone.
Oh,
if you could
I'm
move it a
sorry.
little closer. Thank you.
I'm getting a little claustrophobic
restart.
or something. I don't know.
Just to be fair, we need to start the clock
The
over.
concerns that we have about this project have to do more with the fact that it's right on the freeway. And the original plans that we saw, the mocked-up drawings, showed the buildings facing the freeway. And we talked to them about making them face south so they're not opening the doors and the windows into the fumes from the freeway. And perhaps putting skylights on the windows that are in the rooms facing the freeway rather than windows that would open so they're not always getting the fumes in. And then beefing up their insulation and their HVAC system and so forth to screen out as much of that as they possibly can. I've even shown them a great list of pictures of trees they can put that will block some of that, and 35-foot tall will grow very quickly. So we think that will make a big difference. The neighbors are concerned about the huge grove of trees in this area, and the petitioners have promised that they will do very little to get rid of those. Most of them are on the LDS Church property, so they should be fine. We're a little concerned about, given the size, the width of the parcel, if the street can be wide enough to have extra parking, because it doesn't look like there's much room for visitor parking on this parcel. But again, we haven't seen it. I suppose that will go to the Planning Commission later on. So we recommend you approve the rezone. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from George Chapman. George, you are now unmuted.
With all due respect to Judy Short and her efforts and experience and knowledge, I'm against increasing the density, and I think most of the residents surrounding this property are against rezoning because it's a single-family area that's nice and walkable. I've walked 500 East around this area. It's full of single-family homes. But if you rezone it to higher density, you're increasing pressure on utilities, sewer, water, and you're potentially cutting the equivalent of 1,000 small trees that are not going to be replaced. Even if the grove is mostly on the LDS Church property, there are trees that are going to be cut on R17,000. And these trees are not going to be replaced by small Mickey Mouse trees. And on top of that, if you're going to increase density, if you really care about access and equity, sidewalks are not made to handle higher density. They need to be much wider. Right now, the sidewalks in those areas, you can get one baby carriage. That's it. And that doesn't encourage walkability. And again, just because you're building so-called middle housing, $500,000 townhomes are not affordable. This should be a mixed income property instead of just put in the most expensive townhomes you can think of. So I discourage rezoning the property. Those are my comments. Thanks for listening.
That was the final commenter for this item.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Judy and George. I look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and defer this to a future council meeting.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Fowler and a second by Councilmember Valdemoros. Is there any discussion? I'm going to call the question. Councilmember Peter Eschler.
Yes.
Valdemoros.
Yes.
Wharton.
Yes.
Mano.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion passes. And I'm gonna. I wanted to add something for those that are here for the first time. There is a work session that starts very earlier in the afternoon on Tuesdays when we have council meeting for most Tuesdays, and those meetings are where we talk a lot about these issues and work out and learn about, you know, what can be done and what cannot. And so those meetings are usually very long. We started today at 2. We just finished it before this meeting, and this is a formal meeting for those that are here first for the first time. So this seems faster than those meetings because this is the formal meeting. So just wanted to give you a little heads up of how this process works, but I am probably not the best person to explain since I'm the newest council member here. So our next public hearing is item B5 and is regarding an ordinance R2 text amendment building coverage. We're going to begin taking comments. Brian Fulner is going to give us a little brief explanation on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request to amend the zoning code related to building coverage limits in the R2 residential single and two home zoning district. Currently, single-family homes in this district are limited to 40% of the lot coverage, while duplexes are limited to 45%. Setback and other zoning requirements would not be impacted if the building coverage is increased for single-family homes from the 40% that it currently is to the proposed 45%. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Taylor, please show us our first commenter.
Council Chair, there are 2 people here to speak to this item. The first will be Jim Bradley, followed by George Chapman. Jim is in person to speak.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I think that was a good summary of what the issue is. I just want to make 2 points to help increase your interest in passing this, and that would be your existing policies and existing ordinances support this very thing, and I quote the premise to the ordinance under which the R2 exists. The premise to that says the purpose of the R2 single and two-family residential district is to preserve and protect for single-family dwellings the character excuse me, of existing neighborhoods which exhibit a mix of single and two-family dwellings by controlling concentration of two-family dwellings. Saying and what they're trying to say, well, they're trying, they said it very clearly, is that they want to maintain the integrity, the aesthetics, and the charm of these old neighborhoods. Most of the homes that we're talking about that this would affect are historic buildings or near historic. The one that I'm interested in, obviously, that we own is 92 years old. And it's platted on a legally platted lot less than 5,000 square feet, which is the requirement today. So if you have and this has like 4,200 square feet for the property, so 40% of that is a lot less of a footprint for a home to be built on than if it were a 5,000 square lot. That's just basic math. But also, about 10 years ago, the Salt Lake City Community Preservation Plan was endorsed unanimously by the council, and it says this: the need to preserve the unique character of the city's urban neighborhoods while allowing for modifications for existing homes to meet today's current living standards for space and convenience are important city policies. Back in the days that these historic homes were built, they didn't think about dishwashers, second bathrooms, staircases to the basement, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I think it's a very good idea, and it maintains integrity.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for your time.
I never thought I was going to tell you to go away. Taylor, is there any other commenter?
Yes, next we will hear from George Chapman. George, you are unmuted.
Oh, I love Jim Bradley, but I got to disagree. The R2 amendment building coverage increase will decrease the potential for trees that are more lacking in higher density areas. We went to a lot of effort over the last 100 years to increase trees and decrease building coverage on lots to increase those trees. And now you're trying to decrease the green and trees area, and you're increasing the building coverage, and I think that's wrong. I remind the council that streets were designed for low density, and increasing density will negatively impact bikeability, walkability, and ADA access, and utility pressure will increase. So I discourage you from adopting this amendment. Thanks for listening.
That was the final comment for this item.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, George. Looking for a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and defer to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Fowler and a second by Councilmember Valdemoros. I'm going to call a question. Councilmember Peter Eschler.
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yes.
Councilmember Wharton.
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Councilmember Mano.
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion passes. It brings us now to public hearing on item B6 regarding a resolution, capital improvement program projects. We are going to get a little explanation on this by Ben Lutke, Council Staff Policy Analyst, to give us the short introduction. Ben?
As part of the annual budget, the Council adopted over $45 million into the capital improvement budget. Of that total, the Council approved spending $14 million on debt and critical infrastructure projects. Over the past 2 months, the Council deliberated which projects will receive the remaining $31 million. The Council is scheduled to vote on those final funding awards next Tuesday. Over 90 individual projects are shown on the CIP funding log. The staff report, funding recommendations from the mayor, as well as the Resident Advisory Board, and several attachments are all available in today's meeting packet. The council has a CIP webpage. It has all this information as well. It is available at tinyurl.com/SLC FY23 CIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. We're going to start accepting comments. Taylor, please help us with that.
Thank you, Council Chair. There are 10 people here to speak to this item. The first will be Tina Bagley, followed by Damian Hanks, and then Mark Boobin. Tina is in person to speak.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the project I am applying for. My name is Tina Gustin Bagley. I'm a former teacher, resident of Salt Lake City, and I've worked in both the public and private schools. one of the things I love to do with students is get them outside learning. And so I started this idea with Lindsay Gardens because there's a natural spring there that it's currently diverted to stormwater and running down the gutter. Apparently, according to the city, they get more calls about a broken pipe or something because of that water. So my idea is to create a pollinator garden that daylights the natural spring and provides a teaching tool for the nearby elementary schools. Ensign Elementary School is within walking distance, and also for the residents of Salt Lake City to enjoy a natural habitat. As far as the water, as you know, most the water was diverted underground, and there's an effort to daylight springs throughout the valley. And this would be a piece of what Seven Canyons Trust is already doing. I have a letter of support from them, and it would provide a garden, pollinators, particularly milkweed. You heard in the news probably this week that monarchs are endangered, and so this is a particular place for monarch butterflies to lay their eggs. Also, it's been identified as an area of high need by the Public Lands Need Assessment in 2019. I just think it would be a wonderful place for the citizens of Salt Lake, particularly children, to
Thank you, Tina.
be outside and learn.
Next, we will hear from Damian Hanks, followed by Mark Boobin, followed by Lynn Hall. Damian, you're now unmuted.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, this is Damian Hanks. I'm talking about the repair of Alley 4195, which runs between 11th East and 12th East between Sunnyside Avenue and 900 South. This alley has always been in moderate condition. After the 9th South repair or rebuild, city contractors or the city employees ran heavy equipment up the alley and destroyed pretty much the surface. And we have surface water and a lot of damage and inaccessibility for people that want to use their garages or back access to their properties. ADU access, it delays development of ADU access because it's not a second egress from the property. There are roughly, well, there's about 4.5 acres of land that are affected by this. 70% of the people that live or rent on this adjacent to this alley agree that this impacts our parking, the utilization or the development of property that we all own. We would like the city to make repairs to control the stormwater and allow us to continue to develop all of the properties. I believe there's approximately 26 parcels that are affected. We've worked through all of the issues talking to the storm drain and the engineering, and we don't understand why the city council would allocate funds for placemaking in alleys on flat land when we have actual impacts more about the utility of our land and the way that we might want to develop it and give us functionality for our properties. Yeah, I kind of think that's the end of my comment.
Thank you, Damien.
And next we will hear from Mark Boobin, followed by Lynn Hall, and then David Troster. Mark, you're now unmuted.
Hi, okay, thanks. I have similar comments to Damien on the 4195 alley. It's obviously, like you said, it's affecting our property use. I have a large garage in the back that I can't pull cars in and out of. It's clogging up the street parking. There's permit parking on one side of the street, not on the other. We're right next to East High School, so especially during school hours, it really affects parking in our area. After the 9th South project, the alley was essentially unusable. Before that, it was barely usable, but still usable. And we just had a rainstorm last weekend that washed out the sidewalk down the street, and it took the city about 2 days to get that fixed. And it's been about 2 years since they've done the 9th South project, and we still can't get anybody to come fix it. the city engineers and everybody have been out looking at it. We've worked with them. Everybody agrees that it needs to be fixed. It's not that big of a capital project. We just don't understand why it can't be taken care of in a more timely manner. Again, just echoing comments of it's affecting ADUs, just development in the area, getting cars where they're supposed to be in garages off the streets. There's just multiple safety hazards, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the list goes on. That's probably the end of my comment.
And next we will hear from Lynn Hall, followed by David Troster, and then Walt Booker. Lynn, you're now unmuted.
Unmuted? Hi, my name is Lynn Hall. I own 2 properties that abut the alley that we're talking about, as does Damian Hanks. Over the 36 years that I've lived here, the only change that I have seen is the city's come in and put in a sewer drain for all the moisture, all the underground springs that are affected in this area. I drove down the alley the other day, and it's been the first time since they did the 900 South Reconstruction, and I thought I was going to break an axle. It's in horrible shape. I think something needs to be done. I have slipped and fallen in this alley. My sister has slipped and fallen in the alley. My neighbor's daughter broke her leg in the alley. It's in horrible shape. I think before you guys make a decision on what happens with the alley, bring your personal vehicles and drive from the bottom of the hill up and from the top of the hill down and see what you think. Something needs to be done. It's in really bad shape. As more and more emphasis is being put towards doing ADUs, this needs to be more accessible. Right now, it's a health hazard. It's an accident waiting to happen. And the fact that it's owned by the city, I think the city bears the responsibility for it being taken care of. It's not a huge repair, but it needs to be done. When they did the sewer drain, they kind of did a high center in the middle, and a lot of the runoff water from the natural springs is not going to the intended target of the sewer drain. It goes down the sides. I think the whole thing needs to be reevaluated and addressed. Thank you for your time, and please feel free to bring your personal vehicles and drive the alley both ways. Thank you.
Ben.
Next, we will hear from David Troster, followed by Walt Booker, and then Larry Sugars. David is in person to speak.
Hello, I'm unmuted. Thank you. My name is David Troster. My neighbors and I asked that the City Council fully fund 3 Creeks West Roadways Capital Improvement Project. It's supported by all 26 households on the 2 affected streets, 10th West and 1300 South, that run beside the Jordan River. It's endorsed by the Glendale Community Council. Several septic systems are failing and leaching E. coli into the surface water in this neighborhood. The State Department of Environmental Quality says there's an unhealthy level of E. coli in the surface water. Sanitation and health are the most basic of services provided by any municipality in populated residential areas. Residents in this neighborhood are aware there would be a homeowner cost of $12,000 to $20,000 to remove their septic tanks and connect to the new main city line. And here's the thing. When your toilet doesn't flush properly, or you have an open cesspool of sewage water in your yard, as my neighbor across the street does, you'd gladly pay to rectify these situations. The tanks here are like 50 to 60 years old. Mine's older than that. We can't even install new septic systems because the lots aren't large enough, according to state regulation R3174. However, there are state grants to pay for households to remove septic tanks and connect to city sewers. A city commissioned report completed in October for public utilities estimates that installing sewers will cost just over $1 million. That's sanitary sewers. However, the report lists $263,640 of that $1 million for septic removal and installation of lateral lines. That's not the city's responsibility, and that's where the grants come in. This would lower the cost by $250,000. The council has that report. I added it into the record in the last public hearing about a month ago. I think that was July 12th. I was on an airplane and I couldn't be here. So in addition, this project would add storm sewers, curbs, gutters, and sidewalks.
Thank you,
I'll
David.
send you this. Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Next, we will hear from Walt Booker, followed by Larry Sugars, and then George Chapman. Walt is here in person to speak.
Hi, I'm Walt Booker, Salt Lake City. I just heard I'd asked for some funding for a street. I live on Benchmark Circle. Dan's been up there, other people. I was in a Zoom meeting in February, and I applied for the application for CIP. Fundamentally, it's like this other lady. It's a very unsafe street. I understand, I just talked to him, my project's unfunded. I couldn't quite see if it was funded or unfunded. Ours is the same way. It's a very steep street, it's unsafe. You can't walk on it, you can't bike on it, you can't put a car on it. It's an accident about to happen, and I will tell you, it has never been asphalted in 35 years since it was built. That's really cool. It looks like a street in Afghanistan after bombing. It really does. So I've neighbors built a house there 35 years ago. It's never been asphalted. It'd be kind of nice to get a street kind of maintained. I thought that would be part of these kind of maintenance would be helpful. I don't know. I pay my taxes every year, pay them all. I just like to get some of them. I told Dan I'd be willing to do it myself. I won't pay taxes for 2 or 3 years. I'd be glad to do it myself if you won't. But I would really like you to take a look at it for funding. It's not a big street, but it is in trouble. It's really troubled. So anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Walt.
Next will be Larry Sugars, followed by George Chapman, and then Nedra Crow. Larry is in person to speak.
Thank you. I'm Larry Sugars. I'm here to speak about 900 West. I have a CIP proposal, and I got two purposes. One is just to beautify the west side, and the second is to slow the cars down. And it's hard for the police. I mean, speed limit's okay. It's just hard for the police to stay up with it. But so that's where one of them is those solar speed limit signs, and the other is lighting, because 9th West is like a nice corridor, and I'd like to beautify that, so welcoming people to 9th West. And that's it. Other than, there was a gentleman talking about sewer problems in a city. You got to be kidding me. I can't believe we still have septic tanks here. That wasn't with me. I'm done early. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Larry.
Next, we will hear from George Chapman, followed by Nedra Crow, and then Graham Mather. George, you are unmuted.
Okay, I hope you're going to take notes. Trying to shift the budget to force voters to approve a bond for projects that should be funded with the significant money now available to Salt Lake City is disrespectful, in my opinion. And FYI, traffic circles on streets of 4 lanes increase danger for pedestrians, bicyclists, and a traffic study should cost less than $20,000, and Transportation Department should do the study as part of their job. Bus stop improvements should not ignore shade, and many CIP projects need shading. The 400 South bulb out so dangerous for bicyclists, and ADA infrastructure should have priority on 400 South. It's non-existent. Airports should spend money first on expansion of cart service to comply with ADA requirements, and Salt Lake City shouldn't be treating mobility challenge with a statement that people in wheelchairs need to push their own chairs. That's ridiculous. And $15 is not a livable wage in Salt Lake City. And if a lot is 100% full, the highest priority should be to increase the lots and not do anything else. 9-line railroad crossing is eligible for federal funds and deserves more priority. Toffer Park needs public safety patrols. Every park and every plan in this city should have public safety as a priority. Kids shouldn't have to run a gauntlet of needles and drug users and toilet users. And Sunnyside pedestrian safety improvements should not include a lane reduction. 1100 East, $3.5 million is a waste. People don't want it. It'll destroy small businesses and destroy a nice walkable 10th East. And the Sugar House Safe Streets, $500,000 for 10th East, deserves approval, but the 1100 East Reconstruction project makes it useless. People don't want the local construction. And cities should not...
Thank you, George.
Next, we will hear from Nedra Crow, followed by Graham Mather. Nedra is in person to speak.
Do I have your attention? Good, because I've got a long story. I'll tell it shortly in 4 parts. Part 1, 1847. This is about a grant requesting some money for First Encampment Park. So, 175 years ago, did the people come in on the 24th of July or the 22nd of July? The vast majority came in on the 22nd. They camped at the corner we know of 500 East, 1700 South, between Parley's and Immigration Creek. Amazing. That's part 1. Part 2, 25 years ago, no one knew about this. 99% of the people in Salt Lake didn't know about part 2. Guess what part 2 is? The community came together and created First Encampment Park. The city did not pay for it. The volunteers and private money. In partnership, the city took ownership, and it was a wonderful gift to the neighborhood. It involved the voice of the people to bring part 2. Part 3 is today. When there was a celebration for the 22nd of July and the first arrival at First Encampment Park, without any announcement, guess what? 130 people in triple-digit temperatures walked from Donner Park down to First Encampment Park. Volunteers for 25 years have created and supported this celebration. Part 4 is we need funding for names and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Grandmother. Graham, you're now unmuted.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time. I am here to plead for the approval of the South Bel Air Drive Road Reconstruction Community Improvement Project. I'm a resident on that street. Circulated a petition on behalf of my fellow residents. Our street is in really terrible condition. In May of 2018, the roads around ours were resurfaced, but ours was declared too far gone at that time to merit a resurfacing. And the can was kicked down the road in terms of a reconstruction. I propose that now is the time to do that. The road is deteriorating further and further, and it's not just going to magically improve. And it's currently not scheduled, I believe, for attention for another couple of years at least. So please approve our grant to repave our road. That's it for my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that was our final comment for this item.
I wanted to thank everybody that shared their thoughts on this. For the last few months, we spent a lot of time talking about CIP projects, and unfortunately, the city doesn't have all the funding to fund all of the projects that we have. I mean, I think everybody here will love to fund everything, but it is a hard job, and we listen a lot to public feedback, and we listen a lot to the CIP board, which is a group of neighbors that are part of that board that rank these projects and priorities. And in many cases, some CIP projects take many tries to get funded. I hope that if your project doesn't get funded, you don't get discouraged. I will want you to participate more and to find other ways to either apply the next year, or also see if there's other funding mechanisms that could make it happen. So thank you so much for everybody for their feedback. I'm looking for a motion right now.
Mr. Chair, could I just make a quick comment?
Yes.
A moment of personal privilege. And mostly because I think I'll forget if I don't say this right now. The constituents from the west of East neighborhood that we're talking about, the alleyway, please reach out to me later. There's actually a separate line item that is slated for funding, which is just a general line item for alleyway improvements with no specific alleyways attached to it. So please come talk to me and we can come take a tour of the alleyway and figure out if that would be appropriate for that line item. So we are approving $142,000, almost $143,000, just for general alleyways somewhere in the city which doesn't have a line item. So I want to say it now so I don't forget, but please come reach out to me and we can talk about that later on.
And everybody knows how much you love alleyways.
I'm obsessed with alleyways, so let's talk about that.
Is there any motion on the table? There's anybody?
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and defer action to a future council date.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Fowler and a second by Councilmember Petro Eschler. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. Councilmember Petro Eschler.
Yes.
Valdemoros.
Yes.
Wharton. Mano.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion passes. Our last public hearing of the evening is item B7, and it's regarding a grant application, Homeless Shelter City Mitigation Grant. Before we start taking comments, Sylvia Richards here from council staff, who is on WebEx and is a staff policy analyst, is going to give us a short introduction on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city applies for and receives grants which help to support and fund some city programs. Each grant application is reviewed and then receives a public hearing, which gives the public an opportunity to comment on them. Tonight, there is one grant, as you mentioned, the 2022 Utah Department of Workforce Services Homeless Shelter Cities Mitigation Grant reapplication. And if awarded, the funds would be used to fund 13 new employee positions, including one new One Heart Business and Community Liaison for the downtown and central 9th district, and 12 new police officers, including equipment and new vehicles, which would assist with the needs surrounding the homeless resource centers. And I wanted to mention that because of a timing issue, the administration is requesting that this grant be approved, if possible, tonight under the consent agenda, item G2, the grant withholding batch. And so if I may, the motion could read, close the public hearing and refer this item to tonight's consent agenda. That's just a suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there a motion? Oh, we need to have Taylor, not a motion yet. Taylor, is there people to comment on this item?
It looks like there are 4 people here to speak to this item. The first will be George Chapman, followed by Amy J. Hawkins, and then Michelle Goldberg. George, you're now unmuted.
Okay, remember the old "Where's the Beef" commercial? Where's the beef? That was a great ad. Well, last year, this city got over $400,000 for mitigation, and it should have been used for public safety. So where is the public safety? In a recent New York Times story, an expert explained why expectations of crime encourage crime because people stop walking the streets and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, the ballpark community specifically, but also along the west side, the Jordan River area, North Temple, even kids, you know this, all deserve public safety to be prioritized in any and all plans. So we need walking police patrols, not more police vehicles. We want cops. Where are the cops? I encourage you to approve the grant application, but we want cops, not vehicles. Where are the cops? Thanks for listening.
Next, we will hear from Amy J. Hawkins, followed by Michelle Goldberg, and then Christopher Butler. Amy is in person to speak.
Hello, council members. It's pretty hard to follow Where's the Beef. As the chair of the Ballpark Community Council, we're looking forward to the additional police officers dedicated to addressing enforcement issues around the Gail Miller Homeless Resource Center on Paramount Avenue. But local businesses on Paramount Avenue need more than just proactive enforcement. They need a mechanism to be compensated for the tens of thousands of dollars of damages, or for customer-facing businesses, the loss of customer traffic that they have sustained from people experiencing homelessness or those who prey on them. I shared these concerns with Shelter the Homeless, the nonprofit that owns the Resource Center. Yesterday I asked, is there a mechanism for business owners to report losses to the road home and work with them as the operator of the Gail Miller Resource Center to recover these losses? Property theft, damage, or loss is not covered under the Utah Office for Victims of Crime Reparations Program. Lindsay Hector, operations manager for Shelter the Homeless, replied, telling me that, quote, we have a heart team that meets with neighbors and connects them to grants that help to offset the cost of damages and repairs for up to $50,000. However, on connecting with the heart team to learn how could businesses access these funds, we learned there is no such grant. Please consider using Homeless Shelter City's mitigation funding or helping us to find some funding source to develop a mechanism to allow businesses to recoup their losses. Shelter the Homeless already believes this exists. This is an alarming discrepancy between belief and reality. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amy.
Next, we will hear from Michelle Goldberg, followed by Christopher Butler. Michelle is here in person to speak.
I haven't been here for a couple of years because you're interested in acknowledging crime in the areas surrounding homeless shelters has been underwhelming. I'm here tonight because a little over a week ago, the convicted felon that trespassed on my business property, which is a dog daycare and overnight boarding facility, did not only do property damage, he also shut down the main breaker, which turned off the air conditioning. You can imagine what a disaster that would have been if it weren't for an observant police officer who just happened to be at the Gail Miller shelter around midnight. It was a 100-degree day with dogs enclosed in a brick structure. I don't even want to think what would have happened if there hadn't accidentally been police presence. Mitigation funds need to go towards 24/7 substation commitment to policing the community immediately surrounding homeless shelters. People who want to deny the existence of crime that comes along with the placement of the homeless shelter, but that's just not just insulting to those of us that deal with it on a daily basis. It's delusional. Yes, my daycare business has been down over 30% since the homeless shelter was placed on a dead-end street around the corner from a liquor store, but the thought of losing the lives of my customers' dogs is not an option. About a month ago, I had a shelter resident come into my business and barricade himself inside, blocking the front door, not letting my customers out. I've had people throwing knives down the street. I break up fights. I had a man bashing another man's head in on my front door. There's no setback from my building from the street. We need police presence that was promised to us when the Gail Miller shelter was built.
Thank you.
And next we will hear from Christopher Butler. Christopher, you are now unmuted.
All right, so this feels like just throwing more money at something that's not an actual solution. We should be looking at solving our homeless and unsheltered problem and helping the people who are actually unsheltered. This really seems like it's only going to continue to hurt the unsheltered folks because we're just criminalize them existing. We should be looking for grants and putting money towards helping these people find homes and find places for them to live and the resources they need to no longer be unsheltered. And then I'm also wondering so looking at the grant plan, it says the plan for future funding is to just keep reapplying for this. And I'd just like to know, is there a plan in place if we ever don't get the grant reapproved? Or is that going to then fall on to us as citizens, to where even more of our budget is just going to be thrown at the police force? As well as, what if the full costs are no longer covered by this grant? Again, is that just going to keep falling onto citizens, and even more and more of our budget is going to go to police, which research just continues to show that throwing money at the police doesn't actually solve any of the problems we think they will or would like them to. And so we need to look at solving the actual problem, which is that we have people who are unsheltered, rather than just throwing police at them over and over, and resulting in their lives being worse. Thank you.
And that was the final commenter for this item.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for those that shared their comments. I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and defer this to a future consent agenda for action.
Council Chair, just a reminder, Sylvia mentioned there was a request to consider it for tonight's consent.
Oh, yeah,
So it is
tonight.
listed on tonight's consent, so just want to know if you'd want to remove it.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we close the public hearing and add this to tonight's consent agenda for action.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Fowler and a second by Councilmember Valdemoros. Is there any discussion on this item?
A question, maybe, maybe for Jen. These funds are they're coming from the legislative session that allocated funds for mitigation for around the shelters?
Yes, sorry. This is a unique grant application because it is, it's actually more of a procedural step that follows up from a bill that was adopted in the previous legislative session. So the legislature adopted a bill that dedicated an X amount of dollars to Salt Lake City, to South Salt Lake, to Midvale, to any of the cities that host HRCs, and established a process by which we apply for that funding. And so this is just the procedural step to apply for the funding that was in that bill. There was a question about the ongoing nature of the funding, and it's subject to appropriation, just like anything the legislature does. And so while there's a theory that it is ongoing, I think every year it's up for negotiation with the state and different other city partners. It's definitely not sufficient to cover all of the city's costs relating to homeless mitigation. And while the city tried its best to receive more than that award during the legislative session, this was the amount that we received.
Okay.
So hopefully that's okay to share.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other discussion on this item? I'm going to call the question. Councilmember Peter Eschler.
Yes.
Valdemoros.
Yes.
Wharton.
Yes.
Mano.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion passes. Now, we don't have any potential action items. That's C. But we do have questions moving to item D. Questions to the mayor from the city council. Are there any questions for the mayor? Here we have Chief of Staff Rachel Otto. I had a mental breakdown for a second, and here representing the mayor. And anybody here would like to have any questions? Okay. Now we are going to the part of the agenda, comments to the city council, and comments are taken of any of the items not scheduled for public hearing, as well as any other city business. Comments are limited to 2 minutes. We already went over the city council rules of decorum earlier, and those rules still apply right now. We are accepting your comment in person and through WebEx for those joining virtually. And for those whose only option is to call in, staff is monitoring a separate phone line. Scott Corpany from our staff is helping to moderate the meeting, and we can message with attendees to coordinate. Taylor Hill in our staff will be calling the names of those who wish to comment based on the order of registration or when we receive the comment card. Once we open public comment, Taylor will announce 3 names at a time so the people can have some notice. And we have already done that, so it shouldn't be news to any of us. When it's your turn to speak, Taylor will announce your name. For people on WebEx, she will unmute your phone, your line, so you may begin. For those in person, please step to the podium and use your 2 minutes. At the 2-minute mark, you're going to hear the word time, and your microphone will be muted. If you're unable to finish your comment, please send us your comment by email. We do read those. Or you can call our office. Our contact information is posted in our meeting room and in the WebEx chat. If you do not wish to speak, please either message our staff when using WebEx, or please let us know when your turn is up. Taylor can begin on our first general comment right now.
Thank you, Council Chair. There are 12 people here to speak for general comment. The first will be N Canada, followed by Alex Bayou, and then Juliana Braun. N, you are now unmuted.
Hi, N Canada, District 4. I've been watching the City Council for a number of months to try to find some hope, and I have been disappointed. I feel like I'm living in a failing state, and I do not see that urgency from anyone on the council but Victoria. Victoria, I deeply appreciate your frankness, boldness, and urgency. The unhoused are our constituents too, not just landowners. Anna, as my representative, I'm disappointed that you are infantilizing the unhoused when the resources we're offering them are worse than just being on the street. You have a duty to protect them and enable their success. I feel that every level of our government cares more about profit than about everyday people, about people suffering. Our system is not working. We need a bold vision to implement change. The majority of millennials and Gen Z in my generation are depressed, anxious, and living with their parents unable to afford independence. A troublingly high number of them are suicidal too, and I don't blame them. I'm not sure what my comments are really doing. Does the council only serve the people when it is election season? If we do not take bold action, I fear that my life and my younger peers will be one of pain and suffering. I fear that I and my friends will fall into poverty with rising rents, low wages further destroyed by inflation, and a car-dependent society. We are entering a time where we all have to sacrifice luxuries, even those with fabulous wealth, even those with privilege, even those next to golf courses. Be visionary and be bold. We do not have the privilege to nibble around the edges anymore. Help us. We are not okay. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Alex Bayou, followed by Juliana Braun, and then Kelly McGriff. Alex, you're now unmuted.
Hello, members of City Council. Thanks so much for having me here. My name is Alex Bayou. I'm a policy associate with the Healthy Environmental Alliance of Utah, otherwise known as HEAL Utah. As you'll soon hear from Dr. Courtney Henley, we are in dire need of a human health risk assessment for the inland port. Environmental advocates working on the environmental impact of the port have been asking for reliable data from the Utah Inland Port Authority for years to determine how the development of the port will affect citizens along the Wasatch Front. The development of the port, on top of a steady increase in vehicular, building, and other business-related emissions as Salt Lake City grows, means that our air quality will become worse unless we can identify how to address these issues up front prior to construction. We cannot in good conscience construct this port without thoroughly understanding the potential for exacerbation of human health issues related to air pollution that the port poses. We cannot reduce harm from this new construction unless we understand who could be affected and how. This study should have already happened, but the good news is that HB 443 can provide independent funding for this work, and we already have the researchers we need to conduct it. HEAL has been hard at work behind the scenes to determine the feasibility of a human health risk assessment. We've discussed the study at length with our partners at the University of Utah Atmospheric and Trace Gas Laboratory, and they've determined that they would be able to effectively model the outcomes of potential increases in air pollution if Salt Lake City contracts with them to provide such a study. The expert air quality modelers are confident that they can execute a study to determine the level of air pollutant increase with the construction of the inland port. This data could then be used by a human health scientist that will be described by Dr. Henley to complete the human health risk assessment. This study would be affordable, done locally by experts who understand our unique airshed, and help safeguard against a potential air quality and human health disaster. If the port can truly be safe and green, let's conduct a scientific study proving it. This study should have happened years ago. With the new power the city holds, we have been offered a unique opportunity to make it happen now, to ensure the health and safety of.
Next, we will hear from Juliana Braun, followed by Kelly McGriff, and then Ilger Kazimov.
Hello?
Juliana, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Juliana Braun. I am a new resident of Salt Lake City, specifically the Sugar House neighborhood. I've lived here for less than 3 years. In this period of time, I have rarely, if ever, left my house due to health issues and COVID. The few times I have left my house in this small little neighborhood, in less than a quarter of a mile radius, I have been very nearly hit 6 times due to excessive traffic spilling off of 21 First South, 9th East, and 11th East, coming through this neighborhood. I attended the July 29th meeting regarding the safe side street, and I wasn't really impressed with the offers at hand to try and reduce traffic and reduce speed. For 6 days, over 27 hours, I recorded 3,965 cars traversing through the intersection of East Hollywood Ave and 1000 East. Only 8% of cars stopped. This is really a safety issue. In addition, others have mentioned this evening that high population living and buildings that are being built are only creating overcrowding for streets, infrastructure, sidewalks. Weather does not improve behavior, neither does restrictions in vision such as darkness. I would like to propose testing out theories to reduce and prevent traffic before making final changes. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Kelly McGriff, followed by Ilger Kazimov, and then Makako Kimbrough. Kelly is in person to speak.
Good evening. My name is Kelly McGriff. I'm Vice President, Deputy General Counsel of Unity National LLC. I'm here to speak in support of our application for a telecom franchise agreement. You received a written briefing on that earlier today, and we hope that you'll take it up at your meeting on the 16th. Thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. I bring you greetings from the great state of Alabama, where I traveled from yesterday evening, and am here and will return tomorrow. Unity is a nationwide fiber company that provides communications infrastructure to carrier customers as well as retail services to the federal government, our armed services, hospitals, schools, and large commercial customers. In short, we help build out the network infrastructure that brings new competitors and higher bandwidth advanced services to Salt Lake businesses and residents. Our franchise agreement was signed by Unity and the city in early April of this year. And one of the most important things about the agreement is that it includes Salt Lake's standard franchise terms. We did not want to spend time fine-tuning legal agreements because our interest is in providing advanced telecom and internet service to the city. Speed to market is important in order for us to meet customer demand. Moving this agreement toward approval has been a high priority and has taken a lot of effort, especially by staff members here within the city, and we appreciate the cooperation of those responsible for moving the agreement through the process. At least 2 new high-speed internet providers, one national and the other a top 10 global provider, will provide new broadband service off of Unity's fiber network. This will help lower the cost of IP services to city residents and businesses alike by creating more competition in the market. We're excited to work in partnership with the city, and we hope to contribute to Salt Lake's continued economic success. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Appreciate y'all very much.
Next, we will hear from Ilgar Kazimov, followed by Mikhailo Kimbrough, and then Dr. Courtney Henley. Ilgar is in person to speak.
Good evening here. My name is Ilgar and Ilgar Kasumov. I am a head member of Utah-Azerbaijan organization, friendship organization. And there was so many, I heard this night, so many major problems that I'm even shy to talk about mine. But I'm gonna talk about that International Garden Peace Park that this conversation going on since last year with Mr. Lee Blunkwell, I believe his name, I'm sorry, Bullwinkle. And he got us a couple emails that there is the park going under construction and all that. What we wanted to do there is just to ask a small piece of land, like 200-300 square feet, to put to construct there for to represent our country, like Azerbaijan, and he agreed with that idea and everything. We have an organization community that we are chipping. We were agreed to donate generously for the land, but then he said it's gonna be under construction. That's why we were agree with him to put like just a small statue and donate like $8,000 just to put the statue there. Then he never responded to our emails, and lately I was told that he's actually retiring and in the process of transition his position to someone else. And I mean, those kind of parks and gardens are existing in different states of in United States, and we really would like to put ours here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we will hear from Mikhailo Kimbrough, followed by Dr. Courtney Henley, and then George Chapman. Mikhailo is in person to speak.
Hi, everyone. Please look at the maps that were passed out before this meeting started. All right. So my name is Mikhailo Kimbrough. I am from the University of Utah. I'm a PhD student there, and this map is looking at the inland port. The inland port development, there was a strict rule when they were building this place that they would have a 400-foot eco-industrial barrier between their developments and then the environment around the port. This map takes 2 satellite images from Landsat 8, a satellite used by NASA to get raster images and things like that. And we are looking at the 400-foot buffer zone with these dotted lines. If we're looking at these dotted lines, we can see that there is some significant overlap between the developments and the buffer zone where they're not supposed to be building. I would like to ask the council to increase funding for the training, inspection, and enforcement tools for this area. If the building is developed, or if the buildings are developed without any kind of oversight, they'll continue to take advantage and build in areas they're not supposed to, threatening the local environment, and as well as the bird migration habitats that are so prevalent in the area, and a very important part of Utah's tourism as well. The natural area to the lower left-hand corner is part of a bird refuge that we would like to see maintained. This area is home to massive amounts of bird migrations that come throughout the seasons, and it's important for us to consider the environment around the inland port as well as the human impacts. That's everything I've got. I have extra copies of this map. They'll be outside. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Dr. Courtney Henley, followed by George Chapman, and then Monica Hildy. Dr. Courtney Henley is in person.
Thanks, Makayo. I'd like a copy of that map. Good evening, City Council representatives, support staff, and marathon citizens of the city. I'm Dr. Courtney Henley. I'm a constituent of Mr. Wharton. Thank you for your service. And board member of the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment and a Environmental Health Committee member of the Utah Medical Association. I want to congratulate Salt Lake City for winning back control over some of the property taxes collected in the Inland Port jurisdiction. I urge the council to spend this revenue on a human health risk assessment of the Utah Inland Port project and to encourage the authority and the legislature to provide matched funding. The Utah Inland Port project poses a grave threat to the health and wealth of the citizens of Salt Lake City. Air pollutants like PM 2.5 and ozone cause a plethora of debilitating health problems such as heart attacks, strokes, asthma, COPD, cancer, birth defects, miscarriage, autism, and delayed learning development. The scientific evidence supporting these claims is undisputed. Human health risk assessments collect data on air pollution levels and model the effects of increases and decreases in air pollution on health and economic outcomes. Applying conclusions from studies of other airsheds, a team of local experts and researchers from the U of U, USU, and BYU published an assessment of the human health and economic cost of air pollution in Utah. Their conclusions: air pollution kills up to 8,000 Utahns every year and costs the state $750 million up to $3 billion annually. Hard data collected locally, as Alex alluded to, can be used to model the health and economic cost of air pollution generated by a growing inland port. This will support policies and legislation to limit the pollution generated by the port, which will prevent subsequent illness and death. And it will provide impetus to assist citizens of Salt Lake City and neighboring communities with the healthcare costs of diseases and economic losses of premature death caused by increasing air pollution from the port.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from George Chapman, followed by Monica Hilding, and then Cindy Cromer. George, you're now unmuted.
Okay, this city's street conditions goals should not be fair. That's an insult. The goal should be good or great, and good streets are more important than the $425,000 that is allocated for urban farms. And the fleet block deserves more priority in the ballpark plan, despite being surrounded by lower income residents in Pioneer Park. And the 13 south crosswalks in the ballpark plan are dangerous, and the $500,000 could really be going and prioritized to replace broken storefronts and windows. And again, ignoring a woman small business owner who continuously complains of assaults on her business encourages systemic racism, or, sexism. And I know you're not sexist, you fight it. So I'm asking you to start listening to women and others who complain about crime around the shelters, stop ignoring them, and the staff, your staff, should stop complaining about their continuous complaints. I know the staff, they're not sexist, but they're acting in a way that's going to encourage systemic sexism, and that's the problem. So I'm asking you again to respect a woman's complaints and act on them, or you will inadvertently increase systemic sexism. Thanks for listening again.
Next, we will hear from Monica Hilding, followed by Cindy Cromer, and then Christopher Butler. Monica, you're now unmuted.
Good evening. I'm Monica Hilding of Council District 4. I would like to address the upcoming contract between Salt Lake City and the Utah Inland Port Authority, which could provide tax funds to protect the natural area and fund conservation easements as originally proposed in the 2016 Northwest Quadrant Master Plan. Salt Lake City has a valuable opportunity to work with the National Audubon, Great Salt Lake Audubon, and the Nature Conservancy to protect and restore the natural area just north of the Inland Port jurisdictional zone. Preserving and restoring these areas would allow native birds and animals to thrive and provide birdwatching and recreational opportunities for the public. Our area is world famous for its position on a major global flyway, and we need to protect this. The staff of the National Audubon Society and their peers have extensive experience in managing land donations and conservation easements for the critical natural areas immediately adjacent to the inland port. The Salt Lake City Council can be leaders in preserving and restoring natural area wildlife habitat with a few key actions. Number one, leadership based on the 2016 Master Plan. Number two, provide conservation easement funding per House Bill 443. 3, preserve the natural area with community well-being in mind. Lead a coalition of property owners and stakeholders to develop a long-term conservation easement plan. For instance, the new master plan being developed by UEPA could include a collaborative design for natural area conservation easements. These conservation easements should include some form of water rights to restore and maintain the natural area. Salt Lake City has the ability to designate a share of the future property tax differential to acquire land with conservation easements and fund year-round water supplies for the natural area. Salt Lake City funds would also be a catalyst to attract additional federal.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Cindy Cromer, followed by Christopher Butler, and then Daniela DiBenedetto. Cindy is in person to speak.
42 years ago, Lee Bullwinkle began working for Salt Lake City Parks. There was no open space master plan. The city didn't even have a zone for parks. Eventually, I would find myself in meetings with Lee. I don't remember when I met him. We have spent the most time dealing with proposals for Liberty Park. The first big one I remember was Mayor Cordini's effort to use the northwest quadrant of the park as a stormwater detention basin minus the trees that are still there. Lee probably knew about that bad idea. After numerous proposals in Liberty Park, I commented at a meeting that I was going to have my ashes scattered there. Lee, in uncharacteristic abruptness, said, "You can't do that." By then, he knew me well enough to know that I was serious. Lee's modus operandi has been to solve problems even if other people created them, especially if other people created them. I learned over time that I could count on him for the truth, especially when it was in short supply. I had to figure out how to ask the question. Lee wasn't going to blame anyone. He wasn't going to hand me a roadmap at the expense of someone he needed to continue to work with, but he would answer truthfully. No one will have Lee's institutional memory. If we are lucky, a few future employees will have his reliable integrity. And I thank him tonight for that integrity and for his patience with me. I rarely did anything to make Lee's job easier, except perhaps to say thank you, which I'm doing again tonight. So thank you, Lee Bullwinkle, for 42 years.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Christopher Butler, followed by Daniela DiBenedetto. Christopher, you're now unmuted.
All right, so I see on the agenda where it talks about grant awards, and I see that there's even more grants for funding police activity. Particularly, I noticed the high-intensity drug trafficking one, and I know I missed, I think, the public hearing on all of it, but it's just another one-time grant that I'm worried that eventually coming next year when the budget comes around again, that'll be $500,000 more going to the police, and especially for drug-related things, which I think we all have seen how the war on drugs and increasing police has really done nothing to actually help any of the problems. And so I just hope that with all these one-time grants, we can maybe spend a little time looking into grants that actually, again, address problems that involve the people rather than just throwing money at the police. And really just remember that people who use drugs and even things like people who are unsheltered are still people, and that just throwing police who are often not kind to the people in these situations, that they're still people that we need to treat with decency and that there are definitely better, more affordable ways to help alleviate problems like unsheltered and drug use that really I wish we would spend the time and effort that we do finding all this money for the police and look for ways to actually help the people rather than police them and throw them into jail. Thank you.
And last, we will hear from Daniela Di Benedetto. Daniela, you're now unmuted.
Daniela, are you there? Daniela, are you there? Daniela is not there.
All right, Daniela, we are not hearing you, so I will message you and we can get your comments another way. And after that, that is our last commenter.
Thank you so much for everybody's comments. That finishes that part of the agenda. Now we don't have any new business, but we're gonna move to item F, unfinished business, and we have item F1 regarding a resolution for a general obligation GO bond series 2022 streets reconstruction. I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council adopt the resolution authorizing up to $23.6 million of the city's general obligation bonds and providing for related matters.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Fowler and a motion by Councilmember Wharton. I'm going to call the question. Councilmember Peter Eschler?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros?
Yes.
Councilmember Wharton?
Yes.
Councilmember Mano?
Yes.
Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion passes. Now we move to the consent agenda. This brings us to section G, our last item of business under the consent portion of our agenda. I'm looking for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Warren and a second by Councilmember Fowler.
Mr. Chair, do we need to note for the record that we're adding in the bond that Sylvia discussed?
If I could, just a note of clarification for the record that the homeless mitigation grant as presented tonight during public hearing will be added to item G2 upon approval of the consent.
I intended to include that in my motion.
Okay.
So
I'll second that.
Okay, so it seems that we have agreement on this consent agenda. I'm going to call the question. Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
Councilmember Mano?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros?
Yes.
Councilmember Peter Eschler?
Yes.
And Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion passes. This concludes our formal city council meeting. We all survived this. This council formal meeting now stands adjourned.
Phones, put down your cell phone, and look both ways. A few seconds without your tunes or text message won't hurt you.